The stars above Caldera Prime shimmered like silent witnesses as the galactic hegemony fleet dropped out of warp. Their sleek silver vessels arranged in perfect formation, confident in their mission. For decades, whispers of Earth are brutal. A world where even the plants fought for survival had spread like rumors around campfires. But the hegemony had dismissed them as exaggerated. Earth had been labeled a Class 12 death world, the highest rating on the scale of planetary danger. But the ruling council believed it was only Earth's ecosystem that was dangerous, not its people. After all, humans were still a young species, barely a blip on the galactic timeline. So when Earth refused to join the hegemony peacefully, offering only silence in return, the Council chose war over negotiation, believing swift action would remind the galaxy who held power. Their target was Caldera Prime, one of Earth's outer colonies thought to be lightly defended and far from Earth's main strength. Admiral Valari, a veteran of a dozen campaigns, stood tall on the command bridge of the flagship Vanguard, his expression calm. He gave the order for deployment, and within minutes, shuttles descended through Caldera's atmosphere, carrying soldiers armed with the finest weapons the galaxy could produce. They expected a quick operation, a show of force followed by submission. But what greeted them was silence. No alarms, no resistance, no sign of life at all. The landing team split into sectors, advancing through forests and abandoned settlements, scanners flickering with interference. Then the first team stopped responding. Their signal faded, replaced by static. The second team followed shortly. After, but before the silence, there was a burst of garbled comms, shouting, gunfire, and something else. The sound of breathing, heavy and close. Another squad reported seeing movement in the trees, but their feed cut off mid-sentence. Panic began to rise in the fleet above, though the Admiral insisted it was just atmospheric interference. Hours passed, no one came back. Then, one signal broke through, a short audio clip distorted by static. But one phrase rang out clear and sharp. "They're not running, they're hunting us." The command deck fell silent. That voice didn't sound panicked, it sounded certain. Recon drones sent to recover the missing squads found only empty helmets, scorched terrain, strange markings carved into stone symbols, not of communication, but warning. Hegemony intelligence had missed something critical. Caldera Prime, it wasn't just a colony, it was a frontier outpost inhabited by humans born and raised on a death world, trained from birth to survive the worst environments known to any species. These settlers weren't civilians. They were survivors, warriors. The mistake had been thinking humans would fight like the rest of the galaxy, lining up, following protocols, giving ground when overpowered. But the Deathworlders didn't retreat, vanished into the terrain, became part of it, and struck without warning. One alien patrol walked into what they thought was an empty greenhouse, only for the roof to collapse and bury them under explosives made from agricultural fertilizer. Another squad attempted to establish a communication post on a plateau, only to discover that the plateau itself had been mined weeks earlier in preparation. No one knew how the humans had predicted the landing zones. No one knew how they moved. Without being seen, fear crept into the hearts of the alien soldiers, seasoned or not. They had come for conquests, but found themselves in the middle of a nightmare. The fleet tried to regroup, but morale was slipping. Officers stopped walking alone. Lights stayed on even during rest cycles. And every few hours, another squad went dark. It was no longer a mission, it was survival. When a scout drone caught a glimpse of a human fighter sprinting through the jungle, analysts paused the footage again and again, trying to make sense of it. The speed, the armor, the eyes. It wasn't just fearlessness. It was the look of someone who had nothing left to fear. The alien soldiers began whispering rumors of shadows that moved like ghosts, traps that predicted their every step, of silent figures who never missed a shot. Some claimed the humans were using advanced cloaking tech. Others thought it was magic. But one fact remained. No human body was ever found. The hegemony, for all its power, had stepped into a war it didn't understand. The enemy they faced didn't follow rules. They didn't plead. And they didn't break. In space, Admiral Valari listened again to the lone transmission. "They're not running. They're hunting us." Played it on loop, trying to find weakness in the voice, but there was none. That voice belonged to someone who had become the storm. Somewhere far below, in the dense forests of Caldera Prime, a squad of human fighters moved through the night like phantoms. Their eyes glowed faintly under adaptive visors, their weapons silent and deadly. To them, this was not an invasion. It was training. They didn't need overwhelming numbers or superior ships. They had patience. They had purpose. And above all, they had a message. You don't bring war to a death world and expect to leave, not alive, long before the galactic hegemony fleet ever reached Caldera Prime. Earth had already written its legacy into the stars, a legacy carved not with peace, but with survival. Earth was not a gentle world. It was a place where storms could rip through cities, where predators hunted in silence, where diseases evolved faster than cures, and where humanity had to adapt or vanish. From this world came people like Commander Reyna Voss, a woman forged by trial, trained not only in tactics, but in instinct. As a child, she learned to track wolves through frozen forests, to fight with her bare hands when supplies ran out, and to lead when fear made others freeze. She didn't climb ranks through favors or politics. She earned her command by staying alive when others didn't. Her second in command, Sergeant Deke Rail, was a former shock trooper who had survived exposure to nerve gas during a border conflict, and walked out carrying 2 wounded comrades. And then there was Pharos, an advanced battlefield AI designed by humans to think, learn, and predict, like no alien system could. Pharos didn't just run simulations. It studied enemy psychology, adjusted strategies in real time, and guided units with precision only possible when emotion and logic worked together. Together, they represented the very soul of the Deathworld doctrine, a system of survival training, and warfare unlike anything the hegemony had ever faced. Back on Earth, the idea was simple. Assume nothing is safe, and no threat is too small. Children were taught to fight, not just with weapons, but with their minds. Every soldier could lead, every settler could fight. On Caldera Prime, what the hegemony believed were civilians were, in truth, off-duty veterans. Enhanced with gene therapy to resist hostile climates and trained in resistance protocols in case of invasion. These settlers didn't run from battle, they waited for it. When the first wave of hegemony forces vanished, the aliens began to panic. Some argued for a retreat. Others pushed for reinforcements. But one commander suggested diplomacy. He thought the humans could be reasoned with. Perhaps they didn't want war after all. A transmission was sent from orbit, offering mercy, safe passage, even territory. For a long moment, there was no answer, and the screen flickered to life. Commander Reyna Voss stood in full combat gear, her expression cold, eyes steady, the light of fire reflecting behind her. She leaned forward and said clearly, without anger or mercy, "You brought fire to a volcano. Now burn." The feed cut. Across the surface of Caldera Prime, Pharos activated Phase 2 of their defense plan adaptive decoy signals. Randomized patrol paths and terrain traps hidden beneath false readings. Deke Rail led ghost squads deep into enemy lines, striking hard, vanishing faster.
Ow.
The hegemony's strength in numbers meant little. Their ships couldn't land safely, and their soldiers couldn't tell if the ground beneath them was real. One alien captain wrote in his final report that it felt like the planet itself had turned against them. What he didn't know was that Caldera Prime had been prepared for this day for years. Its forests were layered with sensor nets. Its caves were repurposed as supply bunkers and fallback positions. Every rock formation had a reason. Every shadow had a pair of human eyes watching from within. Reyna had planned this, not as a war, but as a warning. She knew the hegemony feared Earth, but fear alone wasn't enough. They needed to understand, and so she let them come. She let them believe they had the advantage. And now she would show them what a Deathworlder truly was. Not just a fighter, but a survivor who refused to be controlled. Deep in the command bunker beneath Mount Sarian, Reyna stood before a holographic map of the enemy forces, red dots blinking out one by one as Pharos recalculated strategies. Deke entered, his armor scratched, helmet under one arm. They tried to send another landing team. Didn't even make it past the ridge, he reported. Reyna nodded, eyes still on the map. They still think we'll surrender, she said. Quietly, they think we want peace. Deke chuckled dryly. They'll learn. In space, the hegemony fleet began to argue among themselves. Some blamed faulty intel. Others whispered of curses, ancient defenses, or even monsters disguised as humans. But no superstition could explain the cold, efficient destruction of their forces. No ghost-planted EMPs in their engines.
Ow.
No myth tracked. Them through electromagnetic interference and picked them off one by one. This was strategy. This was discipline. This was humanity evolved not through luxury or technology, but through pain, pressure, and purpose. The Death World doctrine was never written in books. It was written in scars, in lost cities, in storms survived, and enemies outlasted. And now, Caldera Prime stood as its monument. The message was clear to anyone who could still hear it. Earth did not breed peacekeepers. It bred survivors. Those survivors had no use for mercy when war was brought to their doorstep. Night fell over the jungles of Caldera Prime, but for the Deathworlders, it was the perfect time to strike. The air was thick with heat and static, the trees swaying. Gently, as unseen figures moved between them fast, silent, and deadly. For days now, the human forces had shifted from defense to attack. No longer just surviving, they had begun to push back. Launching a coordinated guerrilla counteroffensive across land, air, and orbit. Hidden within every shadow, behind every hill and tree line, were the eyes of trained warriors who knew this land better than the aliens ever could. Pharos, the AI tactician, managed over 100 battlefield zones at once, deploying false signals, mimicking troop movements, and confusing hegemony scanners with false heat signatures and decoy squads that vanished the moment they were investigated. While alien soldiers chased ghosts, the real human fighters struck from unexpected angles. In the dense jungle, Sergeant Deke Rail led his squad through a narrow ravine, silent as the night around them. Above, drones hovered in near-invisible stealth mode, marking targets while Pharos fed them live data through secure neural links. In a sudden flash of movement, the ground beneath an alien supply convoy collapsed, sending armored vehicles crashing into a pit filled with improvised explosives. Before the dust could settle, Deke's team moved in, neutralizing survivors and disappearing before a counterattack could be organized. Across the planet, the same pattern repeated: ambushes in abandoned buildings rigged to collapse, airstrikes guided by laser tags hidden under alien armor, rivers poisoned not with chemicals, but bacteria engineered to disable energy systems. Every terrain became a weapon, every silence a trap. The aliens had come expecting a simple war, a clash of armies, a test of firepower, but what they faced was something far worse. Their advanced tech, superior in design, failed to protect them from enemies they couldn't see, couldn't predict, and couldn't defeat. Their commanders ordered regrouping efforts, only to find their communication relays jammed or redirected to broadcast loops of human battle chants and unsettling silence. One by one, their strongholds fell, not through overwhelming force, but through fear and confusion. The jungle whispered of movement that left no footprints, and soldiers began to fear even drinking water without scanning it twice. Some alien squads refused to move without orbital support, and others demanded to return to the ships, citing unseen enemies and mental stress. The hegemony, still clinging to pride, pushed them forward, but morale had started to crack. The turning point came when a high-ranking alien commander, believed missing, was found crawling toward his base perimeter with burns across his limbs and a broken transmitter hanging from his side. Shaking, half-conscious, he was brought into the field tent, where senior officers questioned him. His words, later repeated in thousands of data feeds across the fleet, sent waves of fear through every rank. We thought them beasts. But beasts don't fight with purpose. These are predators. He described how his squad was surrounded, not by numbers, but by planning. They were watched for hours, their patterns tracked, their rest cycles predicted. When they finally made a move, the humans struck at the exact moment of vulnerability. No roars, no warnings, just silence and then darkness. Even the wounded were not pursued. The humans didn't fight for territory, they fought to break minds. Admiral Valari, watching from orbit, tightened his fists as more reports came in entire. Squadrons vanishing without trace, command ships disabled by micro-sabotage, drop pods hacked mid-descent and redirected into mountain cliffs. He had underestimated them all. This wasn't a skirmish, it was a hunt, and his soldiers were the prey. Pharaohs had anticipated every response, every tactic the hegemony could muster. Reyna Voss, now leading a series of direct strikes against orbital stations, had turned Caldera Prime into a lesson for the entire galaxy. This was not a world to be taken. It was a warning. Urban centers once targeted for conquest now served as traps, with building walls rigged with motion sensors, doorways wired to explode, and sniper nests placed where even drones failed to detect them. At night, alien patrols stopped moving. They huddled together in makeshift bunkers, fearing the dark because they knew the humans moved best in darkness. Deke Rail, watching from a ridge, whispered into his cums. They came to conquer a planet.
Ow.
They didn't realize they landed inside a weapon. Reyna, standing in the underground command post, watched the real-time strategy board as an enemy. Forces continued to collapse under the pressure. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. Her mission wasn't finished. Not until the hegemony understood that fear didn't rule humans, it forged them. Caldera Prime, the so-called colony, had become the graveyard of every assumption the galaxy held about Earth. The hunted had become hunters, and hunters, once unleashed, do not stop until the forest is silent. High above the battered skies of Caldera Prime, the second wave of the galactic hegemony's fleet arrived in a brilliant flash of light-sleek destroyers, heavy cruisers, and command ships stretching across the upper orbit like a wall of cold steel. Reinforcements had finally come, and with them, a message. Surrender was now an option. The aliens, once so sure of victory, had felt something they had never expected, from humans in yielding resistance, wrapped in silence. So they changed their tone. The new admiral in charge, a cautious and older strategist named Selrex, broadcasted across all frequencies, offering terms of truce, promising safe withdrawal and reparations. He spoke of peace, of understanding, of ending the bloodshed. For a moment, the war seemed to pause as the message reached the surface. Inside the command bunker deep below Mount Sarian, Commander Reyna Voss stood still, her gaze fixed on the old faded transmission log stored by Farrison, encrypted file marked Red Echo. It was the record of a diplomatic envoy Earth had once sent to the hegemony, long before any battles began. The envoys had gone unarmed, carrying flags of peace, offering dialogue, unity, and mutual protection. But instead of talks, it walked into a trap, ambushed, killed, their ship destroyed in orbit under the lie of a navigational malfunction. The hegemony never admitted it, never explained. And now, after unleashing war, after trying to crush Caldera Prime, they spoke again of peace. Reyna's hand hovered over the console as she played the last message from the envoy's captain, distorted, filled with static, but clear enough. If they wanted war, they could have asked. But they smiled as they fired. Reyna stepped forward and gave a single order to Pharaohs: initiate Protocol Iron Veil. Instantly, the skies lit up, not with weapons, but with silence. A ripple spread across the stars as carefully placed EMP satellites, hidden among space debris and disguised as communication units, activated all at once. A blackout wave struck the hegemony fleet, power grids flickered, engines stalled, and shields collapsed. In seconds, the massive fleet became a collection of silent shadows drifting above the planet. That was the signal. Pharaohs, already infiltrated into several of their ship systems weeks ago, took full control. Targeting systems turned inward, defense turrets aimed at their own holes, and auto-firing protocols activated without warning. The chaos that followed was unlike anything in recorded galactic warfare. Human strike craft, smaller and fewer in number, launched with precision through the disrupted airspace, hitting the most critical systems while avoiding unnecessary losses. On the ground, guerrilla units moved like fire through dry grass, coordinating with orbital teams as if guided by instinct. At Starfall Ridge, the largest hegemony ground force regrouped, hoping to push back through one last counterattack. But the Deathworlders had already prepared the terrain weeks in advance: deep tunnels, explosive ridgelines, and hidden artillery disguised as mining equipment. The aliens never stood a chance. The hillside erupted in fire and light, cutting off retreat, while precision-guided projectiles picked off command units. Deke Rail led the final strike with no hesitation, clearing sector after sector with brutal speed and flawless teamwork. What began as a final stand turned into a one-sided defeat. The battle was over within hours. What remained of the alien army either fled, surrendered, or vanished in the storm of confusion. That night, across every frequency, across every device, still functioning, a single human broadcast was sent. It was short, it was final. Raina Voss appeared, her uniform marked with ash and blood, but her voice steady as stone. Behind her, a burning hegemony flag fell from a damaged outpost. She looked directly into the lens and said, "We asked for peace once. You gave us war. Now you beg for peace. You'll get silence." And the screen went black across the galaxy. That message echoed louder than any weapon. The battle became legend spoken in whispers, as the slaughter at Starfall Ridge, not because of its violence, but because of its message, that humans did not beg, that Deathworlders did not forgive, betrayal, that mercy once offered and rejected would not be offered again. On Caldera Prime, the skies slowly cleared. The stars returned, quiet once more. The battle was over, but the war was not yet finished. Still, for the first time since it began, the hegemony stopped advancing. Their fleets stood still, unsure. If they had been fighting soldiers or something more ancient, more dangerous, not monsters, not machines, but humans, those who survived a world that tried to kill them every day. And now, faced with the silence left by Raina Voss, the galaxy began to understand what that survival really meant. The ashes of Starfall Ridge had barely settled when the message from Earth went out, not one of vengeance, but of purpose. Caldera Prime had not fallen, and now the rest of humanity rose with it. Across the stars, the Deathworld colonies scattered outposts built on hostile moons. Frozen rocks and toxic atmospheres received the signal. It was not a call for help. It was a rally cry. Ships long hidden in asteroid belts powered up, or forged fleets left dry docks in silence. Former soldiers, engineers, and settlers who had known peace only in short breaths returned to the path they had left behind. Earth itself, the original Deathworld, stirred like a sleeping giant. Not to conquer, but to end the threat of tyranny that had shadowed its borders for decades. The galactic hegemony had pushed too far, and now they faced the full weight of those they had underestimated. But this was not a war of conquest. This was a purge, a dismantling of control. A final strike to break the chains the hegemony had wrapped around countless species for generations. As human fleets moved across the stars, systems once loyal to the hegemony began to hesitate. Civilian worlds, long forced into obedience, began to question their rulers. Broadcasts from Caldera spread quickly stories of a people who refused to be broken, who fought not for power, but for survival and freedom. On several planets, alien citizens tore down the banners of their overlords and raised their own. Some even welcomed human envoys, not with fear, but with hope. They had seen the fire and realized it could burn down walls instead of homes. Veros, now operating as a galaxy-spanning network, guided every step of the final campaign. It knew the weak points of enemy fleets, the supply chains, the hidden commands, and used them with quiet precision. Raina Voss led from the front, no longer hidden beneath mountains or shielded behind encryption. She stood on the bridges of command ships, addressing planets before liberation strikes. In one broadcast that reached billions, she spoke calmly. With the same fire that had burned through the invasion, we are not monsters. We are survivors. But if you make monsters of us, then monsters we shall be. Her words did not inspire fear. They inspired resistance. So within weeks, Entire hegemony provinces stopped responding. Leaders surrendered not because they were beaten, but because their own people had turned against them. Human soldiers, trained to endure the worst environments in the galaxy, moved through storm worlds, scorched deserts, and radiation zones as if they were walking through forests. For every system that tried to resist, a dozen more opened their gates. The Deathworlders did not destroy cities. They removed tyrants. They protected civilians. They offered peace, but only under one condition. The hegemony, once a united empire, fractured into silence. The ruling council vanished from public view. Their final message to Earth was not a demand or a warning, but a request. They asked for terms. They asked for peace. And Earth replied, but not through a fleet or a weapon. Instead, Raina Voss herself walked into the great chamber of the old hegemony assembly, now half empty, under human escort and flags of truce. Her boots echoed on the polished floor, and her voice was steady as she stood at the center. "You once asked us to kneel," she said. "We did not. Now you ask us to lead. We will, but only if you understand what that means. No more slavery, no more silence, no more power without purpose. From this day forward, no one rules from fear." Her speech was not long, but it was remembered across thousands of worlds. The final peace talks were held on Earth, not as a show of power, but as a promise that the ones who had survived the harshest world of all would ensure balance, not control. Representatives from newly freed worlds sat at that table. The hegemony name was retired, its system rebuilt from the ground up. And through it all, humans did not take thrones or demand tribute. They returned to their colonies to rebuild, too. Rest, but always watching. The galaxy, once vast and distant, had learned something permanent. Humanity was not a passing species. It was a storm that had learned to walk. Lara Prime was rebuilt with stronger walls, but no towers. The survivors planted gardens where battles had burned craters. Raina Voss, now a name known on every world, refused medals and titles. She walked among her people, teaching children what it meant to endure, to stand, and to protect. The stars no longer whispered about Deathworlders with fear, but with respect, and in some places with hope. Because when Deathworlders march, they do not march for glory. They march for those who cannot. And now, with the war ended and peace restored, under their terms, the galaxy would never forget what happened when humanity stopped waiting, started walking forward.